This is Healthy Souls with Father Nicholas Lowe, helping you to live a Christ-filled life in today's world. Father Nicholas is the pastor of St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, Florida.
Good morning. It's good to see all of you in church this morning. Thank you for coming and worship on this first Sunday during the season. I think one of the most amazing seasons of our church here, the season of Great Lent. To those of you that are watching us live, or if you are downloading and watching this week's message, we are so grateful that you've made St. John the Divine a spiritual home for you, that this church helps you to grow in your own walk of faith. So we're very grateful that you're joining with us. And if you happen to be new to our church, or this is your first Sunday here, we are too grateful that you're here. And downstairs, we have an entire section of our church hall dedicated to you. It's called the newcomer table, and it just basically gives you some information about what our church is all about, things about our mission, where our focus is as a community. I always say this. You always should know what your church stands for. There are 33,000 different Christian denominations in this world. Lutheran is one, Baptist is two, Orthodox is three. There's 33,000 of them. And so you should always be aware of what you believe, and more importantly, what the church that you're participating in is all about. So I encourage you, even if you've been part of our church for a while, definitely see what our church is all about, our mission, our focus, our goals as a community. This Tuesday also, as many of you already know, is our Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls internet radio show. This week, we're going to be dealing with a topic that really none of you have ever dealt with. It's just called anger, and just struggling with anger. So if you have never dealt with that issue, then you don't really need to tune in. But if it is an issue that you may have tomorrow morning on the way as you're driving into work, or maybe on the way home from church, I don't know, that issues of anger, join us. Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Simply go to ancientfaith.com and click on the Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls banner. So let's get started. Today we're beginning a brand new sermon series entitled The Red Letters. In the Bible, there are over 1,026 letters or words that are attributed to Christ. They are the words that He uses to inspire, to motivate, and to encourage people. They're the words that when you deal with the loss of a loved one, He says this, the red letters, "He who believes in me, though he die, will have eternal life." Those red letters in the Bible that when you're going through a difficult time, maybe some of you are in that moment right now, He says in the red letters, "Take courage, for I'm always with you." He says whenever you're wondering what your goal is in this life, what God's purpose is for you in this world, He says, the red letters again, "Let your light so shine before all people that they give glory to God." Every word that God uses in the Bible, those red letters, are there to inspire, to motivate, and to encourage you to be the person that God wants you to be. And in this morning's gospel lesson, in this morning's reading, we see three of the red letters that God, I believe, is speaking not only to the disciples then, but also an invitation to all of you here today. Let me give you the setting. It's the first chapter of the Gospel of John. Jesus is now 30 years old. He's beginning His ministry. And He begins His ministry by gathering and inviting people to help Him. Even Christ didn't want to do everything all on His own. He needed people to help Him. So He goes up to people like Peter, Andrew, and gives them an invitation. He goes up to Philip and later on Bartholomew and gives them this invitation. He's telling them that I need them to be with Him, that I need you to be an example to people. I need you to learn what it means to be a Christian, and more importantly, what I need you to do to share me with the world. And He shares with them three words, three red letter words that I want all of you to hear today. And those words are this. Lean in for a moment. Come and see. Come and see. I think for many of us in our world, we can get the coming part. We can come to church. We can come to our baptism. We can come to be in the pews that we're in. But do we get the seeing part? Do we see what God sees in you? Do we see the purpose that you are on this planet for? Do we see the dream, the goal that God has for you? Better yet, if you were on a one-on-one conversation with God, what would He tell you that He sees in all of you? And one of the things I want to encourage you all about today is, yes, I get the coming part, that's great, but do you see what he sees in you? I remember growing up, this is one area that I struggled with. I was born and raised, as you all know, here in Jacksonville, and I attended this church from a very young age. Like all of you, I would come to church. I didn't have a choice every single Sunday. It was not an ask, do you want to come to church? It was, we're going to church. This is what time you need to be ready. And I started out sitting in these pews that are in this area over here. And I would come to church, and later on I would go into the altar. But I would come to church, and whenever the light was on, I stood up. Whenever the light was off, I sat down. Whenever someone over here did the cross, it must have been time for me to do my cross. I came, I was in church, but I never saw what God's purpose was in my life. And things took a change for me. One of the greatest catalytic moments in my own life was when I was 17 years old, and a friend of mine named Stephen invited me to come to his church for their youth night. When I was there at that youth night, that particular parish had asked all of their youth to invite other kids to come and worship with them that youth night. So I was like one of many other kids who were visiting that night. When I went there, all I knew about the Orthodox Church was this: we're the right church. We're the true church. That's all I knew. So naturally, when I was at this youth night, the youth pastor was asking all of the different people there, all the kids, what church are you from? So I bowed up. I knew what I needed to say. I said, I'm from St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church, and we are the true church. Then I followed it up with this question, being very smarty pants. I said, have you ever heard of the Greek Orthodox Church? And that youth pastor said something that I have to tell you, my first meeting as a parish priest outside of members of this community was to go back to this church and thank them for what they did in my life. That youth pastor looked at me and he said, Nick, I've read about the Orthodox Church. I've been studying about the Orthodox Church. The problem is, though, I have yet to see the Orthodox Church. And what he meant by that is, for a church that is proclaiming that it's the true church, where are you? Why don't you know why you're in church? Are you just simply coming to be in attendance, or do you see what God has in store for you? Do you see the purpose that God has for you? That one moment set me on a course for me to learn about my faith. It helped me to see what God has for me. Let me ask you, are you seeing what God has for you? Do you see what His purpose is for your life? Let me give you this principle for you to take home today, and that is this statement. I think God is walking alongside every single one of us during this season of Lent, and He's telling us this: come and see so that you can learn who you are called to be. Come and see so that you can learn who you are called to be. So, Father Nick, how do we see what God sees in us? How do we help ourselves seeing what we need to be in this world? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let me give you 3 points that I want you to remember. And in your worship guide, when you came in today, we do this every single week. We give you opportunities to take notes on our sermons. And one of the things that we've done recently is we actually made them little hole punched so that you can go home and create a little notebook and just kind of journal your life, your walk of faith. But here's the number one principle. If you truly want to come and see, like what Christ tells us to do, those red letters, here's number one, is that God is telling you and me, come and see, because there is more in store. I think one of the greatest struggles that we have as Christians, not just unique in our own community, but in every Christian group, is there's this level of simply settling where we're at. We look at Sunday school as a period of our life as opposed to growing as a way of our life. We kind of look growing and learning simply at a certain stage, but not always. And what God is telling us is that in the Bible, I'm going to share with you a formula so that you know if you are truly getting and understanding that there is more in store. And Paul says that these are the words. He calls them the fruits of the Spirit. They're found in the book of Galatians. Measure your walk of faith with this litmus test that God says of how you should be living your life, what kind of fruits you should produce. Here they are. The fruits of the Spirit are love all people, not just some, all people. Check or don't check if you fill that one out. Number 2, kindness. Kind to all people. Patience. Goodness. Filled with joy that you are a faithful person. How did you do on that little test? If not, let me give you just a word of encouragement. There is more in store for you. That is the fruit that you were called to produce when you call yourself, I'm a Christian. And a side note on this is today we celebrate the Sunday of Orthodoxy. In a few moments from now, you're going to see all the little kids come around the church, and they're all going to be holding icons, and many of you are going to be going, wow, that's so cute. These little kids are holding icons. Some of them are probably heavier than the kids that are actually holding these icons, but you're going to see them come around here. And you're like, wow, that's so cute, that's so cute. And the reason why we have this procession, just as a side note to all of you, is that we are celebrating a time when people actually believe that we worship icons. And let me just give you a little side note just to remind yourselves that we do not worship oak wood. We don't worship different types of pine wood. We don't worship these. We venerate them. They are windows to our potential. One step further, many of you know that until the invention of the Gutenberg press, people did not know how, listen, to read. You can go back just a few generations where people were not able to read. You know what the word presbyter means? Presbyter means someone that can read. Why? Because you could not read as the faithful people. And we take that so for granted because we pick and choose what history we follow as a society. So what did we use icons for? They were the first visual Bible that we all followed as a church. So that every icon that you see is not there just painted randomly, but that this icon with this guy, with this saint who's got crosses on him, means that he is a bishop. And that is St. John Chrysostom, of whom we have a divine liturgy for today. And St. Basil, who we're celebrating his liturgy actually today. Again, he was a bishop. And we see Christ and the Virgin Mary. And the Virgin Mary has 3 stars on her. That means that she was a virgin before, during, and after the birth of Christ. That when we see Christ having these letters O-W-N, those are the English translations of a Greek word, O-on, means that the same God that spoke to Moses in the burning bush, who said, when Moses said to him, who are you? And he says, I am, O-on, is the same God that speaks to Nicodemus in the New Testament, in the Gospel of John, when Nicodemus says, who are you? And he says to him, O-on. In other words, that same God that was in the Old Testament is now before you here in the New Testament. And so when you see this procession of these icons going around, listen to me, it is a triumphant procession of orthodoxy, of the keeping of the icons, the restoring them back to the church. But it is this as well. It is there to remind you of who you are called to be. That every single one of you are called to be an icon in this church. It is a reminder of people just like you and me, listen to this, who heard the voice of God say, come and see. And they did just that. So as you're seeing that procession go around, am I coming? Am I truly seeing what God has for me? There is more in store for you. Here's number 2. As I think Christ would be coming to us and saying, come and see and make me the center of your life. You know, I love sharing this message with you because for many of us, we put God in a little box. And we're saying, God, when I go through a difficult time, I'll open you up. Or when I need something from you, God, then I'll open you up. But God, don't enter that area of my life. I got control over there. Or when things are going great, I don't even think about God. I'm just kind of going in my own life. But the word Lord that we say over and over and over again in our divine liturgy, one of the translations means that I fall under him. In other words, Kyria, one of the meanings is that I am falling under him. And if God is not the Lord over all of your life, then he is not the Lord at all in your life. Because God doesn't want to be fit in a box. He wants to be part of your marriage. He yearns to be part of your walk of faith. He yearns to be part of your children's life. He wants to be the center of your life. And I love how he says this, the red letters again. You worship a God that never barges into your life. He says this, behold, I knock at the door, and I'm waiting for you, listen, to open it up. God's waiting for us every day. Open that door up. I need to make him the center of my life. And here's number 3. I think Christ would be telling all of us on this first Sunday of Lent. He'd say to us, come and see today. I love you all being in the liturgy, and you're doing great because you're here on the first day of the week. You're putting God first in your life. But can I just give all of you a word, just a word of encouragement? I never want you to just simply come to liturgy, but I want it to be a catalytic moment in your life. In other words, I don't want you to be in church and go, okay, it's liturgy, and in a few months from now it's communion, and then guess what? Yippee, we get donuts downstairs. Or for some of you, it's we're going to Piccadilly right afterwards. Okay? I don't want it to be just a simple moment for you, but that it becomes a transformational moment in your life. That the liturgy may not be able to change your life, but it can inspire you to change your life. And my message for you is, why not start now? Like, God, I want to live my life for you. And no matter where you are, I can be better. I can do better. I leave you with this thought. In the 1950s, a young girl was born named Marina. Marina lived and was born in a small town in Colombia, South America. She was loved by her mom and dad. She was an extraordinary little girl at 1 and at 2 years old and at 3 years old. The parents would just always be just holding on to her. They loved her so much. But at 4 years old, the unthinkable would happen to Marina. That while she was playing outside, men entered into that yard, put a hood over her, and kidnapped her. They drug her through the woods in Colombia, South America. They would beat her, 4 years old, and do everything that you could imagine being done to a girl. And then they left her there. And they left her there with nothing, out in the middle of the woods. She began to cry and bleeding, wanting someone to help her. The first day, no one came. The second day, crying again, hoping for someone to rescue her, but no one came. On the third day, a group, check this out, of little monkeys came to her, and they saw her there, naked, bleeding, crying, and beat up. And these little monkeys threw some food at her to sustain her. She would have not made it past that third day had it not been for those little monkeys that were coming around her. The fourth day, again, those monkeys came and they brought food to her. This time, Marina knew that no one was coming for her, so she ended up going and living with those monkeys. Not for a day, not for a week, not even for a month, but she lived with them for years. This is all documented on the National Geographic Channel, as well as in her book, A Girl with No Name. She grew up losing any ability to speak languages, and she simply followed whatever the monkeys did. So she'd learned how to literally climb up trees. She learned to little grunts and the little noises that the monkeys would make to call out for stuff. One day, though, 10 years later, she's living in this little canopy that the monkeys had built with her. and she sees something down on the ground. It's something very shiny. She's not too sure what it is, so she climbs down that little tree. As she goes to the tree, she picks it up. She looks at it. And when she looks at it, she's so scared that she throws it down and runs away. It had eyes, she remarks. A few hours later, she gets the courage to come back. She picks up that item. And what she picks up was a mirror. And for the first time in her life, she saw herself. She began to cry, not because she was amazed at how she looked, but she knew that she was different. She was different than everything that was around her. She knew that she wasn't like the monkeys, although they were so kind and sweet, that there was something different about her. My prayer for you today is that this liturgy, and more importantly, this sermon, would be a mirror moment for you. That you're not like everything else that's in this earth. That those eyes that are looking at you are the eyes of Christ telling you there is more in store for your life. So can we make a declaration today, St. John the Divine, that we're going to come and we are going to not just come, but we're going to see. I'm going to come and see that there is more in store for my life. That I'm going to come and see that, God, I want you at the center of my life, because if you're not the Lord over my life, you're not the Lord at all in my life. That I want to come and see today. Come and see, church family, so that you can learn who you are called to be.
We invite you to join Father Nick and his wife, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month for their Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls call-in show at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on Ancient Faith Talk.